is Grace Davitt and Fiona Tomas. Guys, thank you so much for coming on this morning. Grace, in terms of the opening game of the Six Nations, it's never easy to play France no matter what, and especially for this setup, but it kind of feels like we're going into this one with a bit more positivity than we have in recent years.
Yeah, definitely so. And like last year, we started with France as well, but we started with France away in Le Mans. And I actually went over to that match. And I remember at times seeing Ireland's defensive set and being like, oh my God, we could actually take this here. And obviously, towards the last 20 minutes, France got a couple more tries in. But you could definitely see the turn in the tables and how Ireland were performing. Obviously, last Six Nations was just a step too far. But yeah, I think there'll be a new belief and confidence within the team, and that's huge when you're playing sports. Obviously, they have a good track record at Ravenhill. They beat and Kingspan. They beat Australia there just before the WXV. They beat Scotland in the last ditch in one of the Six Nations as well. So beating teams like Australia, going across the WXV1 and beating New Zealand, I think, and USA, who are quite a formidable team as well and quite physical, I think will really stand to them. And then the thing about it as well that I'm really excited about is the fact that so many of the players have been playing good rugby, good 15s rugby. You know, you've had the challenge, Celtic Challenge, maybe not as high of opposition as we would have liked, but you know the girls are playing high quality rugby week in, week out, which maybe I would have criticised other times where they weren't playing enough 15s rugby. So I think that's really beneficial. And then we also have the cohort that are playing in the Premiership, the likes of Niamh Jones coming back off the back of winning the title over there as well. So great experience coming back into the squad.
Fiona, someone who follows the Premiership week in, week out, and we don't unfortunately have the opportunity to see as much of it over here. What have you seen from those Irish players? Grace there mentions Niamh Jones.
Yeah, I mean, the standard of Premiership women's rugby in England is increasing year on year. I think it wouldn't be wrong to say that this year it's been the most competitive season yet. The standard across the board is just, growing at a huge rate. And Claire mentioned Niamh Jones there. She has been a standout in that Gloucester Hartpury title winning team who did the three-peat last week at the Stone X. And it's such a great environment and such a professional environment for those Irish girls to really, mix it with the best and really kind of, fine tune areas of their game that they perhaps otherwise wouldn't elsewhere. And yeah, it's become such a melting pot of players over there. The girls in that league are mixing with the likes of Canadian players who are obviously, some supreme athletes themselves. So yeah, it's priceless, really.
To set up, Fiona, from outside perspective, obviously we have the Six Nations coming up, Rugby World Cup as well this year, being hosted in England. I know so many people this side of the water who maybe aren't even massive rugby fans would have got tickets already for the Ireland games because there is that little bit of excitement building around the squad and the talent that's there. But in terms of where everyone is at of the Six Nations sides, can you set up this tournament for us a little bit?
It's always so difficult because I always feel like I go with my predictions and then I just end up getting them spectacularly wrong. But listen, I'm with Claire, to be fair, on this one. I'd like to think that Ireland in particular can really kick on from that massive New Zealand win last year in WXV. Confidence is high. I've heard various things myself about how great the culture is in the squad at the minute. They've really turned a corner from 18 months, 2 years ago, when we know that their off-field challenges were sort of well documented. And if you look at the Six Nations, you've almost had Scotland, Wales, and Ireland all kind of together in that sort of mid-table bubble. And, there was one team that is waiting to kind of take the championship by the scruff of its neck, really, and really kind of challenge for those kind of historically kind of top two spots that we've seen between England and France. And I'd go as far to say that, it is no longer a two-horse race anymore between England and France, because France I think they're on a 14-match losing streak, against England. And England's certainly kind of pushed on a gear, pushed on a level last year against the French. So Ireland have this really fantastic opportunity, this championship, you feel, to, starting with this weekend, really take it to France and establish themselves as that kind of European force behind the Red Roses.
Grace, myself and Kathleen were talking just as we were introducing you about the upturn in fortunes in Ireland under the new coaching setup, and it is quite remarkable, just even from a results perspective. And I want to get your take on that, because the corresponding game last year, the opener, was also against France, which Ireland lost 38-17. But it was a good comeback at the end of that game. Then they lost to Italy next time out. But from that point, really, Grace, it's been so positive. What changes have you seen that are so transparent as to the reasons why it's been so much better for Ireland the last even 18 months, really, since Scott came in?
Yeah, it's it definitely, that Italian loss was a hard one to take. I remember watching it, and I was behind the post, and I could see the attack, Ireland's attack. They were going wide way too early. They were drifting. They weren't hitting hard lines. They weren't getting over the gain line. I think when you look at what Scott is doing, he's tightening everything up. When you look at Ireland's ruck speed, they the fastest average ruck speed of the Six Nations last year. So can we get quick ball? We're not the biggest physical team. We can't match the likes of France and England that way. And what we did in previous years was we used our reactivity, we used our work rate and speed to try and beat defences with getting around them. We now have and I think one of our biggest issues was our line out as well. So, tightening those set pieces up, getting more time with players, with scrummaging. And remember, this is Scott came in just at the turn of professionalism too. So I think a big thing is the fact that they're getting more time with these players now, where they're getting to work together, work with high coaching, especially around the scrum and line out. And then you look at the likes of, we've some class players coming through, and that's I think crucial to our development and our performance pathway, and the likes of Aoife Wafer coming in. We've seen Aaron King coming from the sevens, slotting straight into 15s and becoming breakthrough player of the world. These are huge stepping stones. And I think even now, seeing the pathway, Scott has a lot more players to pick from as well. And when you have more players to pick from, you drive competition within camps. And when there's someone right on your heels for your position, that pushes you to be so much better. And I think that drives a really good culture of competition and then performance, and knowing how well you have to perform week in, week out. And I think that's probably one thing that Ireland have struggled with, is that consistency, because yes, they beat New Zealand, and I worried about the next game, and fair enough, then they lost to Canada. So it's about, can we keep sustaining those high performances? And I think with the team that Scott's got in around them, changing that mindset is definitely key to it, as you say, that culture. And I think it's good attitudes as well, driving. He's a great way about him, driving those good attitudes within the camp as well. So I definitely think they will step up again. They'll know they want to step up. And the thing about this Six Nations is it is the prequel to the World Cup, and it'll be interesting to see how other countries deal with that, because I know last year, England had a rotation every game, which was pre-planned, so that they could blood so many players. So it'll be interesting to see, are other teams going to do that? Will Ireland do that, to give people game time? So that'll be interesting to see, because that will affect results as well.
Grace, the statistics for the Six Nations in recent years can terrify you. I think, Fiona, I'm right in saying the last time England have lost in the Six Nations was 2018. It's remarkable. And then if you look at the last three openers for Ireland in the Six Nations, they've lost them all. But I think really what's only relevant is from last year to now, Grace, and there's a lot of positivity there, what you've just spoken about, the culture change and the game plan alterations too. But one worrying statistic from last year, which I think is very relevant, is that Ireland had the lowest tackle success out of all the nations in the Six Nations last year. Do you envision that improving this year, and if so, how?
Yeah, totally. I remember seeing that stat and going, it's awful. And I think it's one of the things, if you give teams quick ruck ball, what happens is it's just exponential speed. It just keeps growing. So if you give them one quick ruck, then the next quick ruck, and suddenly then you're chasing shadows, and those stats really add up then, especially when you're grasping at players and scramble defense. So it will be one, they'll be looking at tackle tech, but it's more that cohesion together. What is their plan? We obviously see the men's Leinster, and that rush defence. The biggest thing for me is Ireland going together, and I think we've seen parts of that obviously against New Zealand. They were able to keep them out, and it's about that working together. And the tackle tech, we look at like Niamh Jones, she's one of like the highest tacklers. Linda Jungang, like they're well able to tackle, has the highest dominant tackles in the Six Nations last year. But it's just making sure that, one, we made the right reads. There was a couple of games last year, I think Italy might have been one, and we had where a player will jam in on the inside the attacker, where they really need to trust that inside and say, no, Fiona's inside me, that's her tackler, I'm going to stay out and cover the outside. And at times we didn't have that trust in each other, and we jammed in and created that overlap. So I'm sure the more time working together is a real improvement in that, and that trust of, I know the inside of me can take that tackle and are communicating with me of what I need to do. And that will make a huge success, because sometimes a missed tackle is someone shooting out of the line with no intent of making a tackle, and it can skew the statistics. But it's not a good statistic, and I'm sure Ireland will have worked on that as well.
Fiona, as Grace was saying there, with it being a World Cup year, there is a potential to see teams trying to play different players, maybe different systems. Is that your expectation for particularly, say, the likes of England? Because obviously they had such massive disappointment in the last World Cup. Now it's at home. All the pressure is on their shoulders. All the expectation is on their shoulders. We saw what home Euros did for the women's soccer team, and it kind of feels like this is a bit of a moment for the rugby team as well. Do you think that they'll take the risk with the Six Nations and say, look, if we lose a game here, it's not the worst thing in the world, so long as we have that team ready to go for the World Cup? Or are they already at that point where they don't even need to worry about it?
Well, they're on a 20-match winning streak at the moment. And you have this danger of history repeating itself, whereby in the build-up to the 2022 World Cup final, where they memorably lost to New Zealand at Eden Park, they were on a 33-match winning streak then, and all of a sudden it kind of, the winning streak, when they lost the biggest match that they could have lost out of all those games, and they didn't come home with a trophy. And there's some camps that think, well, this is a team that needs to be tested. Like, when you think about why we watch sport, we love sport for the jeopardy of it, right? And there's not been huge amounts of jeopardy when you watch the Red Roses in recent years, and that is due to the tremendous amount of depth in their squad. And Claire touched on the importance of squad depth there, that Scott can perhaps have at his disposal this time round. The Red Roses depth is like literally off the scale. Like, John Mitchell, the Red Roses head coach, he named a wider training camp 2 weeks ago when the Gloucester Hartpury and the Saracens players were still with their respective clubs prepping for the final in the PWR. And he's calling up, England under 20 girls, fringe England players, or, fringe junior players who might not have been that decent enough to make the squad, but it kind of just speaks to the ridiculous talent pool that the Red Roses have at their disposal. And I kind of feel like the Red Roses do need to be properly tested before that World Cup, because, like you said, it's their tournament to lose. They've been number one in the world for some time now. They've had the longest professional setup of any other women's 15s team in the world. And a lot of those girls simply haven't ever lost in a white shirt. And I think it's important that they experience that. And they're obviously acutely conscious of it, because they talk a lot about wanting to maintain that gap, maintain that stranglehold over the other top four nations like New Zealand, like Canada, like France. And they've done that so easily since losing that World Cup final in 2022. Is this Six Nations going to be another walk in the park for them? I hope not. I hope, the likes of Ireland kicking on now, the likes of Wales, who obviously have a new head coach in Sean Lynn. I hope that, we see some kind of green shoots with those sides, and, we can really not perhaps see those lopsided scorelines that we've become so accustomed to seeing in this competition.
Fiona, are England in this bizarre situation where it's a difficulty for them to improve if they're so dominant in the Six Nations? They have other competitions that you've mentioned already, but like this obviously takes up such a significant portion of their year every year. And how can they actually notice differences in their game if they're, never mind winning the Six Nations, consistently winning Grand Slams?
Yeah, I mean, if you chat to a lot of the Red Roses, they have mentioned in interviews to me and in press conferences about how that Canada game last year in WXV, where they obviously eventually ran out winners, but for the first half they were on the ropes a bit. Canada are a supreme team and they really tested them. And you just kind of think, well, are they being tested to the same degree in, the Six Nations, a competition, like you say, they play in every year? And if you pull out some of the stats, they're just sort of incredible. I don't think I can't even think the last time they've even lost on home soil. Their last Six Nations defeat, to my knowledge, would have been in 2018 against France.
That's it. Yeah.
So, we're going back, what, nearly 7 years, which is quite something, isn't it? And yeah, I'd like to see them properly tested. It's funny because obviously they're playing Italy on Sunday, and I was out in Parma last year for that opening Italy-England game, and the score was something ridiculous. I think it was like 10-0 at half-time or something. And they played a really terrible first half. They were really flat. They were off their game. Italy, came out of the blocks, high energy, and really disrupted them at the breakdown. And they kind of were kind of shell-shocked a bit. But then they came out, the professional outfit that they are, in the second half and completely just blew them away. And that might have been a kind of blip, blowing off a few cobwebs, opening a match of the championship. And those are the sort of margins we're talking about when you talk about them improving. Like that for them would be a kind of metric to measure themselves against this time around. So yeah, I hope we see a competitive game on Sunday.
Yeah, it's a slight conundrum because Grace, Aoife English here is writing in the Irish Daily Mail this morning, Ireland ready to break the third place ceiling. And it feels like, Jesus, for the contenders, I mean, that's as good as winning the Six Nations, is it? Because England are just too dominant. Is that a conundrum that the Six Nations find itself in? Or another way to frame it would be, well, it's not England's problem. It's everyone else's responsibility to catch up with England.
Yes, it's definitely not an English problem, and I think that the key to that is the fact that they have one of the best leagues in the world. Every country has their players coming to that league, including our own players, to play at that high elite level. And I think that's, week in, week out, they're playing that elite. Their players are, as Fiona said there, they've such depth because of that league. France, I think, France are definitely one that Ireland can take. One, it's at home, it's first. I think France were a bit cold last year in that first round. They haven't been performing great in the WXV1. They're missing a couple of their key players. Romain Ménager is out injured at the minute. Obviously, some of their big hitters from previous years, NDA, etc., have retired, and they just haven't had that same oomph as they've had in previous years. So if Ireland were going to target anything, I think it has to be this first game. But as you say, yeah, third, it's not a nice play. It's not nice, is it, to say, oh, our goal is third? And I seen interviews from this week, and it was like Scotland were saying, that's our target. We're aiming for third, and it's this real battle. And like, Ireland lost to Italy last year, but they still finished third. So I think the key is you have to make sure that you beat the Scotland, Wales, Italy. And then I think with France, yes, this year, let's see, can we take a scalp? But it has to be an 80-minute performance, because they will crucify you, within 10 minutes. They're like the men's team where they will offload, they will get in behind you. And with England, I think it was 68 points scored against us last year. Like we can't be having those scores in the Six Nations. So I think, yes, we have the belief that we can beat them, but from the outside, you have to be realistic too. And what like Fiona was saying was we want more score lines that are closer where it's competitive. Can we score 4 tries against them? Can we get a losing bonus point? Like they're the things that are going to be small goals rather than looking at the overall, can we beat England? I think it has to be those smaller margins.
I think that's totally fair enough. We've Stacey Flood-Black, like you said. Cliona Maloney's available. Baveen Parsons will miss this weekend, but should be back later in the tournament. Sam Monaghan, of course, is the big loss. I guess where I'm going with this, Grace, is are we better placed this year than we were this time last year?
Yeah, I think Sam Monaghan is a big loss. She's crucial in the line out. She wins so many line outs and steals so many. Great leadership as well. So she is a huge loss. But I think if Aoife Wafer is fit, amazing. We've seen Erin King come from strength to strength, and then you've Brittany Hogan. Like that's a world-class back row right there. You have... we've a solid scrum now. So yeah, I definitely think, and then with the sevens girls off the back of an Olympics coming in, we've seen Eve Higgins play a lot of rugby with the Wolfhounds and Celtic Challenge. So our back line, we're world class too, and they have been consistently playing 15s. We are definitely better placed. It'd be great to have Baveen back. She's such a huge talent. She given no space at all, and she's able to score tries, which is amazing. So I think we are in a better place. We also have Ireland under 20s that have been blooded last year. We've had those Celtic Challenge, so the coaches are getting to see a lot more players to step in. Obviously, there's some new caps being pulled into that squad. And that's it's great for them to get that exposure, and whether they can step up or not, we'll see soon enough. But I think when you even look at scrum halves, we've Emily Lane there. There's a lot of different scrum halves, and I think just with the depth and the numbers, it's the best in a good few years that we've had.
So saying that, Grace, what is your prediction for this Ireland team? I won't even ask you specifically for the weekend, but for this tournament.
Yeah, I really I'm hopeful, as I always be at the start of a tournament, but I'm really hopeful for France. Everyone come to Belfast. It's where I live. Come to Belfast. Come watch a cracker game. It was brilliant in France, and I've no doubt in home soil. Ireland, as I said, have a good track record in Kingspan. They'll want to do the same. I would hope for second. I do think even with England rotating players that they're a step too far. They're just unbelievable. When you look at the likes of Emma Singh, who's playing unbelievable, and she wasn't even featured really in the Six Nations for England last year. You've Ellie Kildunn keeping her out. Jess Breach is unbelievable. I just think England are too well rounded to beat Ireland, but then Ireland beat New Zealand, so prove me wrong. When we won the Grand Slam in 2013, I remember coming home after my first training camp, and they said, "Oh, how'd you get on a train?" I was like, "Yeah, great, we're going to win the Six Nations." And I was laughed at, and I was like, "Why are people laughing? Like, we're going to win the Six Nations," and we did. So it doesn't matter what we say, it's about that belief within camp, and hopefully, if we're saying, oh, they're not going to beat England, they're going, yeah, we can. We've analysed them. We've done the work. They have such a great backroom staff now that are looking at every chink in the armour. How did, as Fiona said, it's been a while since England lost, but you're kind of going, what they'll be able to watch that Italy game last year and say, right, well, how can we slow them down? How can we affect them? And hopefully, that belief internally will come through.
Grace, thank you so much. Fiona, thank you as well. Hope you both enjoy the weekend.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
That was Fiona Tomas and Grace Davitt on looking ahead to Ireland's opening game in the Women's Six Nations this weekend against France.